24 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this morning. I think you're going to love this next interview and the book that it is based on. In the Declaration of Independence, everybody knows this line. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you think about that, I mean, what that says is that God basically says, look, it's your right. It's your right. I put you on this earth. Nobody has the right to take your freedoms away because I gave them to you. And yet, throughout history, there's been countless numbers of dictators and other people who wanted to take your freedom away from you in one way or another. We have prided ourselves in this country of defending freedom. It is what we are about. We could argue whether we actually have it or not. We could argue whether we're held captive not by a government but by social things or whatever. But it is an interesting thing to ponder, the whole idea of freedom. And gosh, wouldn't it be nice if everybody was free? And I'll never understand what somebody actually believes when they think they're going to be a dictator and they're going to take people hostage in their own country. What did Castro get out of all of that?
Yeah.
Did he gain another day in his life? No, he's still old and dying. Mm-hmm. You know. Okay, so maybe he got some better meals than he might have had otherwise, but. We have a pretty good thing in this country, and the Founding Fathers set up a pretty good system of checks and balances. Of course, that doesn't mean it's impenetrable. Congressman Chris Stewart has written a very profound book on the subject of freedom. The book is called The Miracle of Freedom, and it looks at things in history, points in history that were pivotal for freedom of humankind. 7 tipping points that saved the world is the subtitle. Congressman Chris Stewart is a congressman from the state of Utah, representing the 2nd congressional district in that state. He also happens to be a world record-setting Air Force pilot, which I think is kind of cool.
That's pretty amazing.
Congressman Chris Stewart, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. How are you both? So good to be with you.
Thank you for being on the air. And I love this book. I love the thought process of this book.
Well, thank you. It was a really fun project to be involved with, and this idea that this and you did a great job of kind of forming and setting the table here. This idea that freedom has always been with us. Most of us look at the world around us. We see, well, most people are free, and most people have always been free. And in fact, just the opposite is true.
Right.
It's extraordinarily rare.
Yeah.
And let me elaborate on that just a second, if I could.
Yeah.
Demographers have studied and said that something like 120 to 130 billion people have lived on this earth. 130 billion people. Of those, only 5 billion have lived under any circumstances that we would consider free. And here's the most remarkable part. Of those 5 billion, 3 billion of them are alive today. This truly is a golden age of freedom, but it didn't happen just by happenstance. And we can't assume, as you were saying earlier, we can't assume it will always be this way. People lose their freedom all the time. It's something we have to be willing to sacrifice for.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're saying. But the book gives us some history lessons. Do we learn from those history lessons?
Well, I think we do. I really do. And you have some of these stories that took place nearly 3,000 years ago, and then a couple hundred years later, another event would take place, and then another event. But they all, illustrate this march of freedom to where we have this golden day now, where so many people are free. But part of the reason we have that is because people did learn from previous experience, that they did make changes, that we did, evolve as a people to where freedom was more valued and more willing to be fought for.
Right.
But at the same time, we can look at a lot of examples in recent day. I mean, in the last 20 years, former Soviet Union, for example, dozens of countries under the former Soviet Union or the Warsaw Pact, who in the early 90s, when I was in the military flying jets at the time, they were given this gift of freedom, and many of them have lost it or given it up, voluntarily giving it up in some cases, and that's something for us to remember, I think.
Let's look at that, if you could, just for a moment. Why did they give it up? And let me just kind of ask it in almost like I'm trying to slant the story, but I just don't know how else to ask this question. Did they lose their freedoms because there were people looking for entitlements, and not that I'm in favor of taking away things like Medicare. That's not what I'm trying to say. For those who wonder, but sometimes we cause people to say, if the government were to give me everything I need, then my life would be so much better. But then your freedoms will be gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, was that the circumstance that happened in those other countries?
Well, it certainly was in some cases. No question about that, which I think should be a siren song for us as we look at our day-to-day. Are we willing to sacrifice our freedom for security? Are we willing to sacrifice our individual freedoms to have someone take care of us? And we can't have that without, we can't have people take care of us without giving them power over us. And in some cases, as I said, the freedom was simply taken from them. There are people, and sitting on the intelligence committee where I travel the world and go to the real troubled spots of the world, there are tens of millions of people who would fight for freedom. But there are many others who just simply, it's too hard, or the price is too high, or I'd rather have this, like I said, give me security instead. That should be, I hope, a lesson for us as we look at our own future.
Yeah, I think if you were to say, I'm moving away so I can have more freedom, you're leaving Europe to America because it's freer over there. Somebody might say, free to do what? Free to practice religion, free to establish a business, free to marry somebody of my choice. We've had that in our own country too, where you couldn't, right? Wasn't it North Carolina that you couldn't have an interracial marriage?
Yes.
Okay, but now that's not the case. But I mean, like within our lifetimes.
Yes.
That was the case. So free to have a business is one of the freedoms that a lot of people from around the world actually come here for at this point in time. It's not about religion for them so much as it is about starting their own little company.
Yeah, and having any hope for their future economically, having any hope for their children.
Right.
How many places in this world can we go where you can find a parent who looks at their child and knows that their child will have no better opportunities than they've been given? I saw that when I was in the military again and again. I remember in the Philippines sitting in a hotel looking out the window and watching a mother washing her children in a sewer as they lived on the side of a canal. And thinking, I had 3 little boys at the time, and looking at this mother with 3 little girls and thinking, I can go home and my kids can go to school. They can get an education. They can have opportunities. They can have dreams of the American dream. And looking at this mother with her 3 little girls and saying, she must know that those children will have no better life than she's been given.
Wow.
What a blessing it is. And not just economic freedom, but religious freedom and the freedom to think and the freedom to write.
Absolutely.
The freedom to assemble. All of those.
All right. Congressman Chris Stewart, it's an honor. We need to take a little break. We'll be right back. His book is The Miracle of Freedom. We'll be right back.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. For today, we'll see clouds and intervals of sunshine across the region, and there can be a shower and heavy thunderstorm or two around, especially during the afternoon and evening hours. Watch for flooding downpours, the high 86 to 90. A shower or thunderstorm later tonight, though 74 to 77. For tomorrow, clouds, some sun, a couple of showers and thunderstorms around in the afternoon, the high 84 to 88. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Hey, Matt, I know Sunrise Automotive does auto stuff, but I need some tires for my truck. Can you recommend someone?
Yes, I can. We do that.
No, I mean, I need them installed and balanced and all that.
Yep, we do that.
Well, my son needed his windows tinted.
Yep, we do that.
I need my
too.
seat replaced.
Yep, we do that too.
I need a new roof line, a new spoiler, and a new trunk.
We can even do that too.
Okay, I get it. I suppose you can also do a radio show too, huh?
Well, as a matter of fact, join me every Monday at 10 for auto repair with personal care here on The Source.
Of course you do.
One of the most common questions those nearing retirement are asking, will I outlive my money? Retirement questions like these and many more will be answered every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on Planning for a Better and Safer Retirement with hosts Francois and Julian Pozenet. Francois and Julian will help you put your retirement puzzle together. Catch Planning for a Better and Safer Retirement Saturdays at 9 a.m. on Ocala's News Talk, The Source 96.3 FM and 1370 AM.
Career Source, Citrus, Levy, Marion.
brings together business and community partners, economic development leaders, and educational providers to connect employers with qualified, skilled talent and job seekers with employment and career development opportunities. Tune in the first and third Wednesday of each month at 9:30 a.m. to Career Source, Citrus, Levy, Marion, and learn how they can help you.
That was the sound of a tree falling. It could be your tree. You're going to have it trimmed, but never got around to calling Pride Tree Service. It could have fallen in a field, and now all you have to do is call Pride Tree Service, and they'll have it quickly out of the way for a great price. But don't wait until the tree falls. It may not fall in the field. It may hit your car, your house, or worse. So call Pride Tree Service today and avoid all those headaches before they happen. Pride Tree Service, 840-0750. That's 840-0750.
All right, 12 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. So we're having a really philosophical discussion with Congressman Chris Stewart from the state of Utah. And he has written a book that has caused us to have this conversation. The book is called The Miracle of Freedom. But for the listeners, I want you to know what's in the book. And it really goes beyond this. There's some really historical things in here. Now, I'll tell you this, that this morning is the first time I saw the book. So just to be honest with you, I haven't read the whole thing, but I'll also tell you that I almost was late getting on the air this morning because I was looking at the book.
It was
and it was holding my attention clearly. The Miracle of Freedom, 7 tipping points that save the world. Congressman Stewart, I wanted to just tell you this, that your book helps me, supports my belief. Your book supports my belief that what our founding fathers wrote in the Declaration of Independence that implies that freedom is what God wants us to have, is what God wants. Your book kind of makes, because you spell out some things that are unlikely, some historical events that are almost seem like, wow, that's kind of quirky. How did that actually come to pass and still succeed, in spite of the fact that that liberty is the exception on this planet.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I agree with you. We don't take our liberties, our freedoms. One person doesn't give that to another. God gave that to all humans on this earth. And in fact, governments were instituted to bridle the repression of freedom, and to guarantee that those freedoms resided in the people, not in their rulers. And I believe in the idea of American exceptionalism. And as I said, by that, it doesn't mean that we're better than another people. It doesn't mean that we're more blessed. It means that we have a responsibility to other people. And that God, I believe, expects the United States to be that shining city on the hill. And having spent some time traveling the world, both in the military and again on the intelligence community, where I go to places that are as troubled as you can imagine, there's no question that the world looks to the United States as an example. And they look to us knowing that if we don't defend freedom, they have no hope. There's no way that they'll have a better life. And what a great responsibility, but what great blessings come with that responsibility as well.
We're not going to be able to get all 7 points in here, but I'm going to ask you if you could give us some of them, maybe some of you that are your favorites, or maybe some that are lesser known,
Yeah.
or what. Just give us some ideas. What are some of the tipping points that you write about in the book?
Well, I'm always asked which is my favorite, and it's kind of a hard question. It's like, which one of your children is your favorite, right? It depends on the day and how they're acting. But let me start with, I think, the bookends. The first one that we mentioned in the book, and then the last one. And we start with the Assyrian assault on the kingdom of Judah. The 10 lost tribes, and how nearly all 12 of them were lost and destroyed. And they were lost because the Assyrians were the most brutal, violent empire of the day, and in fact, one of the most violent empires in history. And they would have entirely destroyed this people, and without that, we would not have been able to develop the Judeo-Christian values that had began to shape Western civilization. And that was protected throughout this. I mean, the Greeks, we talk about the 300, the Greeks standing up to the mighty Persians, which developed the very kernels of the ideas of freedom and democracy. And then the last one, maybe, again, I mention it because maybe my father, who was a World War II pilot, As you mentioned, I was a pilot in the Air Force, so this one's kind of dear to me. But it also is a tipping point, and that's the Battle of Britain. I mean, what the British did there at that very critical time, as World War II was just beginning to develop, it's impossible to understand how they were able to succeed in that. Every odd was stacked against them. It shouldn't have turned out the way it did, and yet it changed the war. And had we lost World War II, can you imagine what the world would be like today?
Can you imagine? Yeah.
And it was clearly one of I mean, it was clearly one of those tipping points where democracy and freedom and a republic was saved because of the heroism of those soldiers or those airmen who flew. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, if we had lost, I've often thought that Japan and Germany would have been fighting each other. It would be like having a scorpion with a snake, and one of them would have survived, and either one, it wouldn't have been good. So.
Mm-hmm. And when
no.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm ready for. Yeah, I'd like to hear what you were going to say.
Okay, and when people go through history, you go through school, you learn about things like this. It seems to me now that the American people are really standing up for these beliefs more so than the elected politicians, because it seems to me that the politicians now, they're trying to appease everybody in the world, and they're sort of putting the United States in the back burner, and that's where my fear is, that other countries will see this and try to come in and defeat us.
Yeah, I hear that so often, of course, being a member of Congress, and I come home on the weekends and I just want to bang my head against the side of the aircraft as I'm flying home, because I think, what have we done this week? What has Congress done, or what has Washington done to protect people's freedom and to kind of turn back this tide, where so much of the things that we used to take for granted are now being absorbed and taken in Washington, D.C., where people there are making decisions for us that they shouldn't be making. Those decisions should be made in our states or in our families or in our local communities. And look, you can't look at the world around us and not be concerned about that, because we see that there's this rising move towards taking freedom away from people and taking that power and putting it in Washington, D.C. It's a bad deal. I mean, it's a bad deal, and it's one that we have to, and I think American people will eventually realize and are going to rebel against.
I can see why the people of your district voted for you.
Yes,
Congressman Chris
sure.
Stewart. Who is Ted your brother?
He is. And what a pleasure to work with my brother. I mean, he's a federal district court judge out here, incredibly bright, a brilliant researcher. And I've written, 17 or 18 books. So I had this, this ability to write. But man, working with him was so much fun. And working together, I think we created something that we couldn't have done individually.
We right now are facing a world where what happened throughout history is happening still, where religious zealots, I guess that's the word, are really controlling a lot of what's going on the political landscape of the planet. And it seems like that's always been the way it's been. Is there? See, I often think, and I often have hope that a couple of things, that the philosophies that we embrace here in America are studied and paid attention to. Maybe not the behavior of Americans, because sometimes we're embarrassing to ourselves, but I mean the Constitution and the very principles that this country is based on. Those are the things that the rest of the world should be looking at, and many of them have. I mean, look at Australia, how they've changed all of their rules, right?
Yes.
And you have to wonder, is it because they've studied what we're doing over here? But how much of our freedom is in jeopardy because of religious zealots who just don't want us to have religious freedom, who think it's actually their duty to God to either kill us or convert us?
Well, all you got to do is pick up the newspaper on any given day, and you see the horrible evil that is pervasive now through many parts of the world, and you can't ignore that. And we can't assume that they'll never hurt us, because we know that they will, and they certainly are intent upon doing that. And if I could back up to something else you said, and that's, I think we recognize, the United States isn't perfect. We've had our failings along the way, But that doesn't mean that we're evil, and it doesn't mean that what we're trying to do and our abilities to help people. You have to be blind to history to not look back on the last 100 years and to recognize that the United States has been an incredible force for good in the world. That's just simply the case. But some people don't believe that any longer. And if I could share one personal experience that I think illustrates this, I was it was Morocco. And in a very anti-Western, anti-American part of that country, and it was very clearly not welcome there. But I met a man who had a Declaration of Independence and a copy of the Gettysburg Address, written in English, that he had posted in his little store there. And what a remarkable thing to realize that, again, there's tens of millions of people around the world that are fighting against this religious zealotry, as you say, or other sources of those who want to take freedom. Vladimir Putin is hardly a religious zealot.
Right.
There's no question, in my opinion, he wants to take away people's freedom, but he wants to repress and use to his own power and his own advantage the people of Russia. And again, there's millions of people, tens of millions of people around the world that look to the United States and that hope that we will continue to stand as that beacon.
Wow. Wow.
The book is called, what is the book called again? Seven Tipping Points? Oh, The Miracle of Freedom. 7 Tipping Points. Well, 7 Tipping Points is the bigger words. Yeah. I have a copy of the book.
Yeah.
7 Tipping Points That Save the World, The Miracle of Freedom. Call me if you want the copy that was sent to us here. How's the book doing? When did the book come out?
It came out in hardback quite a while ago, actually. It's I've written a couple books since this, so it's been maybe 3 years. Maybe 4, but
okay.
We're just releasing it in paperback now, and so we get a chance to talk about it again as the paperback is released.
We had a guest on who was trying to persuade us to believe that the reason Christians are being attacked by ISIS is because of the Christian Crusades way back when. Okay, mm-hmm. and my 2 comments to him was A. Well, that was then. This is now. What's the? How can you even connect the 2 dots? But then B. Well, how do you explain the hatred of the Jews? I mean, if you're going to attack, it seems they hate the Jews more than they hate the Christians. Let me give this one away. I think I got somebody on the phone. Good morning. You want the book?
Yes, I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janice. Right?
Yeah. This is Janet. Yes.
Okay, Janet. It'll be waiting for you here. Okay.
Thank you so much, okay?
Thank you. Thank you. And Congressman, could you give us, let's see, do you have a website for the book, or how do we get it?
I think, the easiest thing is, any bookstore has it, or jump online like most people do, and Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or any place that sells books, they've got it, and it's easy to grab.
Real quick, one final note.
Did I comment on your...
Go ahead.
Well, could I comment on something you said earlier?
Sure.
This idea that ISIS is... this idea that ISIS or some of these Islamic groups are fighting against us because of the Crusades, I just think that's insane, isn't it? How do you explain the repression of the Kurds? How do you explain the repression of women?
Right.
Of any minority? I mean, these people aren't fighting against Christians because of the Crusades. They're fighting against Christians because they're evil.
That's
because
right.
They want to kill and destroy anything that could. That's why they're doing what they're doing.
See, we have some good congressmen in Congress. Congressman Chris Stewart.
I vote for you.
Thank you so much, Congressman. That was awesome. We'll be right back.
Attic Mall Studios. This is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. Another batch of emails from Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State expect